Greetings all, and welcome to the 41st episode of the VTP, or the Veteran Trainer's Perspective. Today, we're going to be taking a look at an aspect of the world of Pokémon that is not only well known to a fan base, but oftentimes serves as the main plot point underlying the adventures that players take on within their journeys through the main series games. Yes, today, we are going to be taking a look at ancient myths, legends, and religions that can be found in the world of Pokémon, and taking a look back in time to where they are from, how they connect to the regions of interest, the themes that link them together, and how they compare to religions within the real world. Well, it is true that the ancient myths and legends of a particular region oftentimes end up connecting in a very important way to the adventures that you as a player take part in within the games. In truth, these legends and myths are much more than a simple plot device, instead acting as a rich look into the history of a given region and how the followers of ancient religions shaped their region of origin, serving as the foundation for everything that would follow them into the modern day to at least some degree or another. I never really thought to talk about this particular subject since it's something that has been covered by other PokeTubers too numerous to count, but there is one building in Hearthome City, a strange building known officially as the Foreign Building, or more properly in Japanese, the Foreign Culture Building, that drove me to come to the topic fully, though in a form that's a bit different perspective than most. I don't think it needs to be explained too much that the building is obviously designed to resemble a church or cathedral of some sort, and while it might seem to stick out like a sore thumb even compared to other regions, it is known that for English speakers, Fantina, the gym leader of the city, has a French accent to her dialogue in-game and is supposedly from France, or Kalos in this instance. As such, it makes sense then for the building to be based on a cathedral, complete with stained glass windows. While it might not be apparent at first what the building is meant to serve as a house of worship for, the way in which the people inside promote the grace of life in the Pokemon world, supernatural powers, and the balance of spirit and nature, and the stained glass windows in the back of the building showing a shining light at the top of Mount Coronet, it clearly shows that it has to deal with the entities that call Spirit Pillar home as the likely source of their worship, specifically the Creation Trio and Arceus, beings that will be covered here among many others. This house of worship gave me the idea to analyze the major groups that we have substantial evidence of existing, and from there, actually look at the ancient legends, myths, and people of the main series games, and compare them to not only see the underlying shared themes among them all, but also in turn, how they compare to modern religions in the real world, and what that says about how such a topic is actually handled in the world of Pokemon. Before we can get into the myths and legends that are specific to the different regions though, there are two groups of Pokemon that I feel need to be mentioned right away because their legends and especially presence actually span across multiple different regions, and the first of those would have to be the Unknown. The Unknown might not be legendary Pokemon in any real sense, but their existence, not just in the Johto and Sinnoh regions, but also the Sevi Islands, is more than perplexing given that they are also some of the few Pokemon known to exist whose actual dwelling places are built specifically for them, and for them alone. This includes the ruins of Alpha in the Johto region, the Celestian ruins in the Sinnoh region, and the Tanabe ruins in the Sevi Islands. Though it was uncertain just what exactly they were initially, it is now believed by many scholars that the Unknown are likely the living arms that Arceus used to create the universe as we know it, and this has been particularly made evident by the discovery of the Sinnoh ruins in recent decades, a temple built on the border of the Johto and Sinnoh regions that is currently inaccessible to most researchers. As such, given that the ruins they are found within seem to be utterly devoted to them and the capacity to join together to create new life and everything else that one could ever imagine, it is without a doubt certain that said ruins were built by the Celestica people of the Hisui region, the ruins being the temples that are made to honor them and the power they can possess together when in large numbers. Sadly, the lore of these creatures seems to stretch back so far that even for the Celestica people, little evidence is left to connect them other than geography and the Sinnoh ruins, which are said to be the very first temple that the Celestica people ever built, and are so locked off these days that the Unknown themselves are needed to help arrive at the location without a nasty trek through dangerous mountainous terrain. Though most traces of the legends are now gone, it is more than clear that the Unknown were worshipped greatly in the ancient past across multiple regions, and thus have a rightful place among other legends that have cropped up in regions across the world. Secondly, they are the creators and worshippers of the Regi family, namely Regirock, Regice, Registeel, Regigigas, Regieleki, and Regidrago. Unlike the Unknown, we really don't have a clear understanding of just who exactly built these entities and what the purpose of it all was, but it is at least known that it was mostly a work of a single group, as they all were linked from the use of the visual braille system as a language for running and communication. These people are believed to have created Regigigas in ancient times through some sort of power and process that has been lost to time, with these entities then going on to craft the rest of their group with their signature Crush Grip attack. While the power of these beings allowed this unnamed civilization to not just thrive in multiple regions, but even across continents, it seems that at some point the people of this group grew fearful of the power of their creations, and in response, they sealed them away in ancient sites across the world, only to be discovered by researchers in more modern times. Now, it's important to note that aside from the Pokémon as a focus, the people themselves have been the source of much scrutiny over time, as it is unknown who they actually are, and while the existence within the places shared by the interests of the Celestica people may suggest them to be one and the same, I find this highly doubtful, as the Celestica people are known to have used the unknown themselves in ancient times to form their words and murals, while the visual braille system used by the other group is incredibly distinct. The only places where the two overlap are the Tanabe ruins as well as Snow Point Temple, but given the isolated nature of these locations, it makes more sense to me for them to instead be rare points where the two civilizations actually met and exchanged ideas. Regardless, while the name of these people might be lost to time, their dedication to the cause before them is understandable, ensuring that the power of these legendary golems is only to be in the hands of those that can heed their creators' warnings and control their might. Starting off on regional exclusive legends for the main series games, there is the Johto region, where the main legend of interest revolves around the legendary beasts of Raikou, Entei, and Suicune, and the legendary Pokémon Lugia and Ho-Oh, as well as the tin and brass towers of Ecruteak City. According to legend 700 years ago, 2 9-tier towers were built within Ecruteak City in hopes of fostering friendship and hope between Pokémon and people. The eastern tower, known as Tin Tower, though today simply referred to as the Bell Tower, was designed to be a place where Pokémon could awaken and start each day anew. A local Ho often perched at the top of this tower and considered it to be its permanent nesting ground. The western tower, known as Brass Tower, or referred to as the Burn Tower today, was designed to be a place where Pokémon could go to sleep in peace. While reports are a bit hazy on the subject, it is believed that a local Lugia used the tower as its permanent nesting ground. For many generations, peace surrounded the towers in Ecruteak City as a whole, and it was a prosperous place. But a bit less than 200 years ago, disaster struck. A freak storm generated massive lightning bolts that struck many homes and buildings within the small city, setting them ablaze. One of those buildings was Brass Tower. Although all the people and most of the Pokémon within the tower were able to escape to safety, 3 unidentified Pokémon were trapped within the basement of the tower. The blaze lasted for 3 days before a sudden downpour finally put out the fire, but by then, the trapped Pokémon had been burned alive and reduced to little more than ashes. According to legend, Ho-Oh felt such pity towards the deceased Pokémon that it resurrected them in the form as representative of the entire fiasco. The lightning bolt that started the fire, Raikou, the fire itself, Entei, and the rain that finally stopped the blaze, Suicune. Considering that these legendary beasts are often seen around the world, it is unlikely that the origin story truly took place here. However, all historical records make no indication of any different events, leaving the legend as Ecruteak City's official public record. It is possible, however, that the Ho modeled the creatures after legendary beasts that were already present in the wild, which in turn makes this an isolated incident. What is known is that the Ho that once rested on Tin Tower flew away and has only reappeared on extremely rare occasions. The Lugia, believed to live on Brass Tower, flew away to an unknown location and has not been seen since, though many believe that it may be living within the depths of the region's Whirl Islands. Aside from the members of the legendary golems, the Hoenn region is primarily known for the legend that surrounds the weather trio of Kyogre, Groudon, and Rayquaza. According to Hoenn mythology, in the beginning, the oceans and the earth are said to have battled constantly for dominance. At this time, the world overflowed with natural energy, and the forces of nature themselves represented by 2 monstrous deities. Early humans came to call the beast of the waters Primal Kyogre, and the beast of the land Primal Groudon, with them respectively being the entities responsible for the formation of the oceans and land comprising the Hoenn region. These titans clashed frequently and caused mass devastation as they did so, with the oceans swelling and drowning everything, while oppressive heat and light baked and incinerated everything in sight. The two had clashed since the beginning of their incredibly long lives, but with every clash the destruction became increasingly worse, and the life of the world is swallowed again and again by their rage. Several thousand years ago, however, when human civilization began to really flourish in the Hoenn region, the two met once again, and the fight brought such destruction to the world that the humans of the region cried out for help, asking to help not only end the fight, but to end the shower of meteoroids that had descended upon the world at the same time. Their pleas were answered by the legendary dragon of the sky, Rayquaza, who descended from the clouds above and calmed the two raging beasts, forcing them to sleep. 1,000 years of peace followed, but again, disaster awoke when a large meteoroid fell to the earth and punctured it, forming the massive crater now known as Pseutopolis Crater. This event released a massive upwelling of natural energy that awakened Primal Kyogre and Primal Groudon, leading them to the fiercest fight they had ever had with each other. For 20 days and 20 nights they raged, and eventually the balance of power was disrupted, forcing the natural energy of the world to spiral out of control. The descendants of the people who called upon Rayquaza did so once more, this time wishing with all of their might in their presence of the fallen meteoroid. Suddenly, the rainbow rocks shined brightly, and Rayquaza descended from the clouds as if attracted by the object. This object would later be known as a keystone, and it proved to be vital for, in its presence, Rayquaza shined a brilliant green light, and when the light died down, the people saw Rayquaza unlike any other, a beast we now call Mega Rayquaza. The creature descended to the ground and, using the golden filaments hanging from its body, drained the primal energy from the bodies of Kyogre and Groudon and returned it to the earth from whence it came. The two beasts fell into a deep sleep, and Rayquaza returned to normal, leaving to the sky once again. The people of the Hoenn region built the Sky Pillar in reverence for their savior, and embedded the massive keystone in it, hoping that one day they would be able to see their savior again. 1,000 years of peace followed this event as well, but during this time, the people of the Hoenn region predicted that an even larger meteoroid would hit the Earth once again, this time large enough to break the world forever. Thus they created the red and blue orbs to contain and control the powers of Kyogre and Groudon, and later the Jade Orb as a holy symbolic sign of worship for Rayquaza, and entrusted the legend to those of their descendants, the Draconid people, leaving murals on the Sky Pillar to tell their tale to future generations. In addition, some of them turned their sights to the Johto region and constructed the embedded towers, a symbol of the power held by these three giant deities, and it is said that those who demonstrate their worthiness may even encounter these creatures there, though the reason why is still uncertain. According to legends of the Hisui and Sinnoh regions, the creator of the universe, Arceus, was born from a great cosmic egg before the universe ever existed. Shortly after birth, it used the power of the unknown to create the universe as we know it, and in turn, it created Dialga and Palkia to rule over time and space together and, for reasons that still remain unclear to physicists, created Giratina as a living embodiment of a strange form of matter. After this, a single egg was made that contained the lake trio of Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf, which not only covered the essence of knowledge, emotion, and willpower to give existence of life as we know it, but even more specifically to help counter Dialga and Palkia if they were ever to go out of control, possessing the power to craft the likes of a red gem, thus the power to make objects like the red chain to contain and control their rage, and make them come to their senses in case they were ever put into a state of frenzy. In the ancient times of the human occupation of the Hisui region, Arceus rained down 10 bolts of his light to transfer Pokémon in the region, and taking up the challenge, a single man, the hero of Hisuian legend, gathered these 10 Pokémon and used them to challenge Arceus and his avatar, and in winning, brought prosperity to the people of the land, known today as the Celestica people. These humans were granted audience with not just Dialga and Palkia, but also Giratina, and they built great temple complexes and statues to honor not just them, but the noble Pokémon of the hero's team, and even alpha Pokémon within the Coronet Highlands and parts of the Crimson Mirelands. For a time, it seemed that the people of the region were able to live in peace with the Pokémon of the region, but this would not last forever. As the statues of these Pokémon were built, it seemed to be in a vertical display of worship. By this, it is meant that the higher in elevation among Mount Coronet that the statues were built, the more they were revered with importance by the Celestica people, with the Temple of Sinnoh hosting the statues of the 10 noble Pokémon at that time, and the pinnacle of it all reaching out to Arceus. However, a problem emerged here, as the statue of Giratina that they built was built closer to Arceus than any other, the noble Pokémon being the only exception. This led people to worship Giratina as a being that was more powerful than the other members of the creation trio, and given that it too could energize other Pokémon with light from its own being like Arceus, the reverence was understandable. However, perhaps fueled by the people that worshipped it with such reverence, Giratina saw itself as a being worthy of even greater reverence, and chose to rebel against Arceus in an attempt to usurp him as the greatest of beings in the universe. But the rebellion failed, even as Giratina managed to use his power to place many Pokémon in a dire state of frenzy out of anger. Its rebellion would lead to the creation of the Distortion World, where Giratina was forced into a state of exile. In fury, it lashed out, using its power to open rifts in space-time in order to send its power into the world once more, sending others into a state of frenzy that would lead to it effectively killing most of the Celestica people in retaliation. In the aftermath of this, what little of the Celestica people were left chose to destroy any evidence of Giratina's existence, including the statue that had spurned the events of the disaster from the onset, and they are forced to live without the light of Arceus bathing them once more, a punishment for supporting or even instigating Giratina's rebellion. In time, people would come from regions far from them, and would take the name of the Celestica people as their own, despite not being the true inheritors of that name, forming the Diamond and Pearl clans, and while they argued for a time over who was the true inheritor of the titles of the people of Sinnoh, the name given to Arceus in ancient times, it is known that they would eventually put their differences aside. Nonetheless, the true Celestica people were left to die slowly outside the glory they once shared with the Pokémon of the region, and today, the only true descendants of the Celestica people reside in the people of Celestic Town, and in particular within the champion of the Sinnoh region, Cynthia, and her immediate bloodline. The Unova region is distinct from other regions, in that it has not one or two, but 3 different legends that can be spoken of here regarding the Pokémon they live within its borders. The shortest of them would be the Swords of Justice, of whom little is distinctly known about outside the more modern appearances in human history. Over 2 centuries ago, during the heat of the American Revolutionary War, many fights broke out within the forests and swamps of the Unova region, where American soldiers would lure British troops in before decimating them with surprise attacks. At the time, it was believed that a local Cobalion, Terrakion, and Virizion were roaming the forests and swamps of the Unova region and were becoming increasingly agitated over the bitter conflict, sometimes attacking both sides out of sheer frustration with their powerful sacred sword attack. Eventually, the issue went beyond their control when a cache of gunpowder was accidentally ignited near some dried timber, setting the moor of Viserys completely ablaze. The ensuing blaze nearly leveled the area and killed many Pokémon. Thanks to the heroic efforts of the local Cobalion, Terrakion, and Virizion, however, many were saved from the blaze, enabling the moor of Viserys to eventually become repopulated and restored. Among the Pokémon saved was a young colt-like creature known today as Keldeo, who had been separated from its parents, and would eventually, according to legend, learn the secrets of the trio and become able to utilize the sacred sword attack on its own. Although the humans regretted their decision immensely and only began to re-enter the moor after decades of recovering, the legendary quartet has rarely been seen by humans ever since. Second, there is a local legend regarding the forces of nature, including Tornadus, Thunderous, and Landorus. Within many parts of the American Southwest, the climate is often unbearably hot, and the land usually too dry or infertile to bear crops. At one time, many parts of the Unova region were almost exactly the same. At that time, the survival of people was effectively dependent upon three male deity-like creatures: Tornadus, which blew in rain-bearing clouds from afar; Thunderous, which used electrical powers to continuously clear land of dry brush in order to prevent massive destruction from fires; and Landorus, which seeded barren ground with fertilizer in order to enable plant growth. The problem is that many ancient Unovans only worshipped Landorus because, without its power to spread fertility, the efforts of the other two would be for naught. Eventually, Tornadus and Thunderous grew tired of being ignored for the most part, and decided to get revenge on humans by working together to destroy everything they had helped build. Tornadus swept away the homes and crops of the people with terrible windstorms, while Thunderous scorched the soil black with massive thunderbolts. The devastation was so immense that it seemed as if the very livelihood of the Unova region was in jeopardy. Landorus became furious with the beast and, although they were companions, used his tremendous might to force the two out of the Unova region temporarily, saving the people from their wrath. In honor of Landorus' bravery and willingness to protect the people despite their error, the ancient people of Unova built a shrine honoring its deeds with a small patch of the Unovan countryside. Even today, the abundant shrine stands proud amongst the surrounding environment and is continuously taken care of by the few native Unoans who remember the story. The Landorus involved in the incident eventually departed once it realized that the people of the region no longer needed its power, but it still appears in the abundant shrine every once in a great while, and even then, only when it senses the presence of both Tornadus and Thunderous. It's likely that Landorus has yet to forgive its companions, who continue to plague the Unovan countryside to this very day out of sheer anger. Thirdly and lastly, there is the legend of the Tau trio of Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kurem. According to Unovan legend, over 2500 years ago, there was a prosperous civilization known as the People of the Vale, who lived in harmony among an otherwise barren patch of land, referred to as the hometown of the valley, in the Unova region. Although the land would normally have been barren, the People of the Vale apparently had access to a powerful device called the Sword of the Vale, which, when used in conjunction with a tremendous source of power, could utilize a strange energy weapon known as the Dragon Force that effectively turned whatever barren land it hit into fertile land instantly. Although this ancient kingdom lasted for quite some time, it was eventually torn apart from within. At that time, the power source of the Sword of the Vale was provided by two separate sources, of Victini and Kurem in its original complete form. Shortly after acquiring the Great Dragon to help him, the king became the proud father of two sons within a span of only a few years. In their honor, the king used fragments of the rocky body Kurem had been enclosed within to build many charms, today referred to as the Light and Dark Stones, and distributed them to his highest guards and patrons. Over time, the two boys grew up and sought their own ways of ruling, but it was these differences that would ultimately spell the end of the last great Unovan civilization. The exact legend of what happened is still a bit fuzzy and is told in several different versions, but in all likelihood, it is the legend that involved Kurem as we know it today that is the most important in this analysis. When it came time for a successor to take over the kingdom, the two brothers fought vehemently over what route the kingdom should take. The older brother, clothed in white, believed that truth should be the principal force behind their rule, using whatever new technology or ideas that came along to better the kingdom and the world in general, regardless of potential negative effects. The younger brother, clad in black, instead sought to preserve ideals over all else, believing that the principles that made the kingdom as glorious as it was were to be honored and used to govern it for as long as physically and mentally possible. It is unknown exactly why the ancient dragon took such interest in these two, but it seems that the notion of truth and ideals were two issues that are never considered to be conflicting. Confused about what it should do in the presence of such fury and passion, the ancient dragon went on a rampage, destroying everything in its path before. To the surprise of people then and now, it split in three. Unable to maintain physical and mental stability, the beast split into Reshiram, a living representation of the passion and heat that comes with truth and the advancement of technology and culture, Zekrom, a living representation of electricity that sparks and fuels the might of ideals and maintains power throughout history even as the rest of the world changes, and Qrem, the mind and body of the original dragon, left damaged and heavily weakened by the fearsome split. The people of the Vale, the kingdom that once held itself together firmly, was racked in chaos, as the two brothers and their respective deities fought for what seemed like forever, while the fission corrupted the energy within the dragon force, turning it from an instrument of fertility into an instrument of destruction. With the help of the Victini, the old king managed to fly the ship far away to a place today marked by the city of Aendulk, and created artifacts known as the Pillars of Protection to contain the energy of the dragon force and deactivate the Sword of the Vale. Unfortunately, when the Sword of the Vale finally landed, the king died from sheer exhaustion, leaving Victini trapped within the barrier generated by the Pillars of Protection. Moreover, in time, the two dragons grew so wearied from the fights that they fell into a deep sleep, encapsulated in a special dimension only accessible to the light and dark stones that were originally built in the honor of the two young princes. The two princes realized that what they had done was wrong, but could do little more than vanish to parts unknown, leaving two such stones hidden in the bowels of the Sword of the Vale before leaving the kingdom in ruin, never to be seen again. As for Qrem, it is believed that it left the kingdom shortly after that and traveled back to where it had landed, the giant chasm, and began living in a small cavern within the surrounding forest land. There, it lived in extreme agitation and fury, going so far as to attack any living creature that went near it for sustenance, including the people of Lacanosa town at night. In response, the citizens of the town built a massive stone wall around the city and forbade people to go out at night. Qrem stopped feeding on humans after that, and has apparently not repeated this move in recent times, though the citizens of the city still obeyed these rules even though they no longer believe in such a mythical creature. I would really like to be able to speak much on the ancient legends of the Kalos region here, but as most are aware of, the legends of the region, as they currently stand, are incomplete at best, and really only manage to address the existence of Xerneas and Yveltal, and even then, the legends of the Kalos region barely touch upon them. 3,000 years ago, Az, the great king of Kalosian legend, lost a fluet that was very dear to his heart in a great war that pitted the Pokémon and people of the Kalos region against each other. In unimaginable grief, he built a grand machine that used the power of Xerneas, in combination with the sacrificed life force of other Pokémon, to revive his deceased Pokémon and in turn grant it immortality. Due to the nature of the machine, however, Az was also contaminated in the process, making him too immortal. Although he managed to bring back the Pokémon he loved, he was filled with such hate that it converted the machine into a weapon and, harnessing the power of Yveltal and even more innocent lives, initiated a massive extinction event that ended the war by destroying almost every living thing in the region. Disgusted by his actions and the fact that it was brought back with the life energy of other Pokémon, his prized fluet abandoned him, taking its mutant eternal flower with it to leave Az alone to survive into the modern day. The role of Zygarde is currently unknown within this greater legend, which is a shame given that its power and attributes more than define it as being of great importance in keeping both Xerneas and Yveltal in check. But thanks to the announcement of a new Legends game that will likely revolve around Zygarde to some extent or another, we thankfully should eventually get the answers we need to understand its role within the Kalos region and the world as a whole. In the Alola region, the major focus of Legend revolves around not a few, but four entirely different groups of Pokémon, namely the members of the Cosmog family, the members of the Guardian Land Spirits, the Ultra Beasts, and Necrozma. Thousands of years in the past, Necrozma existed in a much more powerful and deity-like form than the form it currently is seen with today, for at that time it was a whole and complete creature. The light that flowed through and made up a large portion of its body shined brilliantly and brought great power to those who bathed in it. With its power, its light shined into many worlds, transforming the creatures in these worlds and granting them power beyond the wildest dreams of many, even being the true source of power behind the Z-Crystals and totem Pokémon that can be found in this universe. The people of Ultra Megalopolis rejoiced at its presence and brought it tributes to convince it to help power their lands, and in doing so, allow them to advance the technology and society far beyond what would have been possible otherwise, oftentimes paying great attention to the creature than the natural light that also bathed their world. However, as time went on, the people of that city grew greedy and forced Necrozma to use increasing amounts of energy to advance their lives, straining the creature's power. Eventually, the strain and drain became so great that it damaged Necrozma, breaking off pieces of it and rendering its form incomplete and reducing it to the state it now takes as a standard form. This placed the creature in an excruciating amount of pain, and without its light, it went on a rampage and absorbed all the natural light in the world in order to keep itself alive at the very least, plunging the world of Ultra Megalopolis into eternal darkness. It then attempted to enter into our world by opening up Ultra Wormholes across the Alola region. However, in its weakened state, the natives of the Alola region, along with the Guardian Land Spirits, were able to drive the beast back into its world of residence, where the people of the city fought against the creature for generations, only recently managing to contain the creature inside of a capsule at the top of Megalo Tower. However, in the process, Necrozma managed to open many portals into other universes, allowing Ultra Beasts to swarm the Alola region, to a degree where the Guardian Land Spirits on their own could not keep up with them. Just when it seemed like the region was at risk of being totally plunged into total destruction, a Sol Galeo and Lunala appeared into the fray, and instead of fighting with the Ultra Beasts, they fought against them and used their powers to force them back into their worlds of origin, saving the Alola region in the process. This brought in a new era of prosperity for the region, and in their honor, not only were the temples of the Sun and Moon built in their honor, but in our world, the two had a child, and the Cosmog born of this union was put into the care of Tapu Koko of the Guardian Land Spirits to protect. The two deities of Ultra Space would eventually leave this world, and in their absence over time, the legends that spurred the reproduction and the establishment of the modern Alola region were lost to time, with only the Guardian Land Spirits remaining in the minds of the public up until the recent events within the Ultra Crisis. In the Galar region, the major focus of legend is the legend of Calyrex, the hero duo of Zacian and Zamazenta, the steeds of Glastrier and Spectrier, and finally Eternatus, and stretches back to the beginning of the habitation of the Crown Tundra by humans. In ancient times, it is said that Calyrex ruled as the benevolent king of the Crown Tundra and the Galar region as a whole, and had the miraculous ability to create vibrancy in the land through the manipulation of the local flora. In exchange for loyalty, respect, and tribute, Calyrex brought great bounty to the land, his very strength derived from that of the people themselves, for even the feat of taming the wild beasts Glastrier and Spectrier was only possible through the Reigns of Unity, an item that has been created by the very people of the region, keeping said beasts from attacking the people and devouring their crops. Unknown to him, however, a great monster lay dormant beneath the ground to the region, for 20,000 years ago into the past from the present, the alien creature Eternatus had crash-landed into the region and had been sleeping ever since. However, 3,000 years ago from the present, the creature would wake from its slumber, and in an attempt to re-energize itself, it would trigger the event known as the Darkest Day, darkening the sky black and emitting Galar particles and Dynamax energy across the land that caused the native Pokemon of the region to Dynamax and Gigantamax out of control. Though the combined efforts of Calyrex's steeds and the Knights Zacian and Zamazenta were able to overpower and defeat Eternatus, sending it back into a deep sleep once more, the battle left the Knights wounded, and extreme exposure to the Dynamax energy and Galar particles the creature had emitted weakened the king and robbed him of his capacity to create radiant flowers, which was a key component needed to create the Reigns of Unity. Without this, he lost control of his steeds, and the land began to falter, and with this change the people began to forget Calyrex, and could not produce the rains needed to maintain his control. Over time, as the people lost faith and forgot the ways of old, the land grew colder and colder as Calyrex lost more and more of his power, until the land became the tundra known today, with little land being usable for human support. Zacian and Zamazenta, on the other hand, went to relax and rest their wounds to the hot spring of Sirchester before they returned to the slumbering Weald, where they rested their battered bodies and entered a stasis, becoming statues in the woods and eventually fading into the annals of legend in the region. It is only in recent times the legend of these creatures has come to light, thanks to the events of the Eternal Crisis, but it certainly paints a picture of a land where people were once fine with being ruled by a Pokemon and not just living among them, something that puts more modern politics into question at the very least. Lastly, in the Paldea region, while the Paradox Pokemon have their own lore to speak on, the focus here is on the ancient past in regards to the Treasures of Ruin, and the story highlights both the destructive power and the reason why they are currently sealed away from human grasp. In ancient times, there was a Paldean king known for a seemingly insatiable sense of greed, so much so they would happily invade other nations just so he could loot them for valuables for his collection and wealth. However, one day a merchant from the Far East came to him and offered him a series of 4 objects: a broken sword, a set of tablets, a set of jade beads, and a vessel. He took a great liking to them and paid the merchant handsomely for them, but what he was not aware of at the time was that the 4 relics were cursed, having been passed between evildoers back and forth for centuries to the point of becoming corrupted from so much exposure to negative emotions and actions. One night, this final act of greed in purchasing them was what they needed to awaken, as the 4 treasures morphed and became legendary Pokemon we now know them as today: Qianpao, Wo-Chien, Chi-Yu, and Ting-Lu, respectively. Upon coming to life, the dark corruption that led to their creation was allowed to run rampant, and they broke out of containment, proceeding to completely destroy the kingdom. In a last-ditch effort to contain the damage they could deal, a group of Pokemon wielders were hired in order to put the beast away, and while it took every ounce of the power they and their Pokemon had, they were eventually able to seal the Treasures of Ruin away, only for them to fall out of public eye and into obscurity. Today, it is said that the shrines where these beasts were bound are still in existence, but are each sealed with 8 mystical stakes that can only be pulled by someone of pure heart and that has strong bonds with their Pokemon. Only when each of these 8 stakes are pulled can any of these beasts be released back into the wild, though such an action could bring about great calamity to the region once more if they fall into the wrong hands. Now that we've been able to take a good look at the most prominent ancient religious groups and legends within the main series games, there are 6 major comparison points with reality that I think are worth considering here. The easiest theme to readily understand and compare is the decline of these civilizations and the eventual extinction from modern cultures. The fact that many of these tales of former civilizations are talked about in the past tense is the first major clue that something is not entirely right, as most of them have either partially or even completely vanished from the face of the earth, leaving only writings and architecture behind for modern humans to examine and read to understand who they were and what made them so distinct from other groups in history. All civilizations are bound to die out at some point or another, as nothing truly lasts forever, and the reasons that can lead to such declines can be incredibly wide-ranging and more than a bit mysterious. Understanding what led to these people vanishing is a bit of a mixed bag, as while we have plenty of records from locations like the Sinnoh and Unova regions as to what led to said decline and the fate of the people as a whole, others like the creators of the Regis have gone without a clear understanding of not only who they were, but what happened to them for the vanished with little trace left. Time marches on for many, while some groups do still live on to a minor extent, most have not survived the ravages of time, the value and nature of the worship and religious ideology not always apparent outside the physical remnants of their culture they left behind, and for the real world, this applies under the same general circumstances. From the mentioning of remnants of past civilizations, we can next talk about the second common theme that is shared by the majority of the groups that have been highlighted here, and that is the ruins that are often left behind by these civilizations long after their time has passed. While there are a few stragglers from these groups that have managed to find a way to pass their religious values and legendary tales to younger generations, there are many that are unable to, as their culture is all but gone from this world, and in both cases, the only physical objects left behind to substantiate and prove the existence of these groups are the ruins that they leave in their wake. These range wildly in their forms and appearances, as well as how much of them is actually left intact, but they often share a general purpose as pieces of architecture that are once used for sacred or ceremonial purposes, with many of them including temple complexes that are open for brave explorers to venture into to learn more about their creators. While it isn't always clear exactly what a given set of ruins might really mean, and the language that may be written on them might not be initially understood, but they often prove to be incredibly important to not just the validation of past cultures, but serving as a window into the most sacred of beliefs and practices, helping to us to understand their religious rites of worship even if they themselves may not be here any longer. The real world tracks quite nicely with this as well, and has proven to be necessary to understand not just lost and extinct religious cultures, but even the roots of those that are still thriving today. Looking away from the people themselves for a moment, the next theme to be addressed has more to do with the creatures that these ancient groups revere and worship than the people themselves, and in particular, the fact that Pokémon, and not people or anything human-like, are the seats of worship in every single case here. It's more than apparent in the Legends of the mainline series games that Pokémon tend to almost always be the sole point of worship in these major regional religious groups, and in terms of power, this makes sense. The entities that serve as a seat of worship have powers that go far, far beyond what humans are otherwise capable of, and thus it makes sense for them to be revered so strongly. But this is often in opposition to the real world, as while it is true that many quote-unquote pagan religions focus on the worship of animals and animal-like entities, more contemporary religions that have survived today are focused much more on people and human-like entities, whether it be Christianity, Islam, Judaism, etc. I think that the differences here really lay with how humans have viewed themselves and our position in the greater universe as a whole, or even just our planet. We tend to put ourselves on a high pedestal, or at the very least see the major gods and deities of our religions as human-like in some fashion or another out of a species-centered ego. But in the world of Pokémon, these major groups instead look to powerful Pokémon and see them as the true rulers of this world because their powers go far beyond what we could easily achieve on our own. It is a humbling existence, and it works out for both sides in most cases, if Pokémon like Mega Rayquaza are anything to go off of. So it makes sense for these ancient groups to worship these entities as genuine gods in their own right, and not just as part of or in association with more human-like entities. On that note then, there is then the notion of where we as humans stand in the grand nature of it all. And once again, the consistent themes of the world of Pokémon compared to modern religions in the real world tend to clash strongly in many cases. In the real world, many contemporary religions see humans as an ultimate creation of the heavens above, not always in terms of power perhaps, but as the ultimate creation of creation itself, that we are the final products last of all, and that we are inherently special because of that. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam show this the most strongly, as we were created in God's image, the ultimate gift because none of the angels in the heavens, nor even the demons in hell, really embody this sort of form. We have the gift of sharing our face with that of the creator of all, an honor not even the most powerful of angels can claim, thus raising us on a pedestal as closer to God in that respect than any other living entity. In more ancient real-world religions though, it is much more that we share this world with the creatures around us, and while some might see us as lesser entities than them, such as with the Greek and Roman beliefs, I think that at least a few cases, and the world of Pokémon as a whole, portray it much better, as we are neither greater nor lower in importance to the creatures around us. It is true that in the world of Pokémon, the creation trio made by Arceus were made in its image just as mentioned before, but we in Pokemon actually share this world. We are not the greatest entities of creation, but we are also not lesser in that stance. We are equals in the world of Pokemon, and for a time, it is known that we did treat each other as such, even if Pokemon came long before humanity did. Personally, I think that this way of thinking makes much more sense from an ideological perspective than what the real world often offers. We've barely been around at all as a species in the grand story of life on Earth, so to see us as anything more than a fluke of evolution, just like the rest of the creatures we share this world with, just doesn't make sense to me. The purpose and role of faith and religion serves as the next point of comparison for this analysis of religion between the real world and the world of Pokemon, and while they are executed differently in some cases, I think there are definitely some similarities that can be seen between the two worlds. Religious faith itself in this context serves the purpose of providing a way to achieve the goals of salvation for oneself and others within a given religion, and if there is a god involved in it all, rendering due worship and obedience to said god. This makes sense even in concept alone, for if there is a seat of worship to be had, there are often rules and sacraments that must be heeded in order to give back to the world and give something to oneself as a reward for servitude towards the particular deity and deities. We all want to do what is right, not just because it is right, but because it will serve us as well, either in life or after it, and from there, worshipping the one that has established these rules in a way serves to amplify this even further. For the world of Pokemon in ancient times, this framework can be seen in play as well, as the people that once worshipped and even served for the grand deity-class legendary Pokemon out there, among others, have done so because they believe there is a sense of righteousness behind it, and that such efforts will be repaid in kind at some point or another. This is especially apparent in legends such as those in the Alola region, whose reverence for the likes of Sogli and Lunala came from their vow to protect the people of the region from Ultra Beasts, going so far as to have a child there to be protected and raised so that a guardian of their kind would be there to help keep the region safe in the future alongside the guardian land spirits of the region. In that way, though the seat of worship may be different, the real world and all times in the world of Pokemon show that faith is a prominent part of all of this that has kept the stories of how these great entities have impacted us as a species alive, and thus the religious faith established lingers on, even if said groups in the latter would have gone extinct, leaving nothing but signs of their faith behind them. And finally, the last thing I would like to talk about is how these different religious groups have managed to impact and find their way into modern society, and the differences and similarities between the real world and the world of Pokemon are quite fascinating. In the real world, the major religions that have survived into modern times have managed to do so by establishing deep roots that stay buried for many centuries, and with the rise of religion as a powerful component to life in many parts of the world across many different cultures, it has helped many of them not just survive into modern times, but have become the roots of civilization both in ancient and more modern times. Societies are built out of shared beliefs and functions, and with the rise of religion in that role over thousands of years into the past, it isn't surprising that it has all managed to in turn survive and even thrive today, in turn forming the bedrock upon which much of modern society lives off of. With the world of Pokemon, however, the effects are somewhat the same, but have not had the lasting impact that we see in the real world. As the rest of this video has shown, many different legends and religious groups have arisen in many different regions over time, but very few of them have any real representation anymore. Why is that? Sadly, it seems that the first shared theme of comparison here illustrates this simply and tactfully. The civilizations built on the same sort of bedrock are all but extinct. It tends to be very hard to keep your religion and beliefs intact when your people are no longer there to pass it down to further generations. However, this is not to say that they are entirely gone, as recent events have often led to the unveiling of these entities that these groups worshipped, showing them to not only be real, but also bringing them back into public consciousness once more. While this means that modern society and the reality of Pokemon might not be overly embedded in the beliefs of these ancient people, they nonetheless have twinges of it all featured in them, and thus have their place in building and cementing the foundation of society in that world, even if it might be subtler about it in practice. While the many legends of the world of Pokemon might seem a bit odd to some, and may not always leave much behind to help us understand just what it was that led people to worship many of the deity-like creatures seen in the ancient world of Pokemon, they have had much to tell about human society as a whole, and how it all stacks up against the real world and its religious base. Though they might have had their differences from one another, in the end, they have both served as foundation for the way that humans interact with both each other and Pokemon, and in turn show how the world of Pokemon isn't that much different from reality in that context. As such, I can only hope that, in both cases, that they will help to make it more apparent what sort of faith and in what beings has kept both worlds running in a functional state, and how they may both shape and influence the worlds as a whole into the future. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time on the next episode of the VTP. Thank you all for watching this video. It always brings me great joy to see others enjoying the work I do to try and make the world of Pokemon and the fascinating creatures that lay inside of it feel as real as they possibly can. If you really enjoy my work, please feel free to leave a comment and subscribe, as I always do my best to respond to any and all comments that are left on my videos. In addition, if you wish to learn more about my work and help support it, you can find links to my Patreon page, as well as email and other contact information to my work on DeviantArt in the video description down below. Furthermore, you can find a link to my Discord server there as well if you'd like to get a first glimpse at what videos are coming up next and converse with other fans of the world of Pokemon. Thank you for taking the time to watch this, and have a wonderful rest of your day.